Hey guys, it's Navonod on No Limit Hold'em. This video series is going to be all about 3-betting. The first video we're going to talk about 3-betting in position and out of position, how to construct 3-betting ranges, when to polarize, when to be value heavy, how to deal with depth and our opponent's propensities, etc. And in the next video we're going to talk about responding to or dealing with 3-bets when we're in and out of position, and possibly there might be a part 3 which would be playing in 3-bet pots. So when we're talking about constructing 3-bet ranges, the 4 things we want to consider is their position, stack depth, your villains, mistake propensities or overall propensities, and then whatever image you have or metagame dynamics are in place, and the way that those factors are going to affect your 3-bet ranges. I hope you're not picking up all that range. Geez, Pete's like the moon, the sunroof, the whatever the hell that thing is called, where the sunlight comes through. The sunlight, the sun lamp, fuck, whatever that is. Anyway, the 4 factors that are going to really have the biggest impact on your 3-bet range construction are position, depth, image, and villains' propensities. The way that they're going to influence your ranges is when you're in position, you want to be more polarized, out of position, less polarized. When you're deeper, you want to 3-bet hands that have more nut potential, more synergy. And when you're more shallow, you want to use more hands that have good showdown value and domination. Your opponent's propensities are going to cause you to weight your 3-bet range one way or another. If you're against the nit, you want to be more bluff heavy and more polarized. If you're against the station, you want to be more value heavy and linear. We're going to talk about why all these things are as we move through this material. If you're against a very aggressive opponent, you want to be more polarized and probably more balanced. When you've got a tight image, you want to play as if you're loose, and if you have a loose image, you want to play as if you're tight. And I think that probably goes without saying, but what does it mean to play as if you're loose when you're tight? Well, if you have a tight image, you should be bluffing more, and you should be using more of a polarized range. And if your image is very loose and very aggressive, then you want to be 3-betting more of a value-heavy and linear 3-betting range. So why do we want to polarize our 3-bets in position? Well, first of all, what does polarized mean? In case you're not familiar with the concept, go back and just stop this video right now and just watch Navonod's, I think it's Silver Bullet series Polarization. Just type into your search bar, Navonod Polarization, you'll get there. If we took our entire continuing range, whatever hands that we aren't going to fold against an open raise, that range is our C range, or our continuing range. If we chopped it into 3 chunks, the top, the bottom, and the center, a polarized range just means that we're going to be 3-betting the poles, the top and the bottom, and we're going to be flat calling the center. So when your opponent is out of position, what's he going to do about this? He can't just start calling you more often. And when you're 3-betting a polarized range, that's exactly what you don't want. You don't want to run into a player that's going to call you a bunch, because you're going to have a lot of bluffs and etc. So when your opponent's out of position, he can't really stop us from playing a polarized 3-betting game. And since we really want to play this 3-bet game in a polarized way, because it allows us to bring in more hands to play profitably, by way of allowing us to use the bottom of our calling range or the top of our would-be folding range to 3-bet, and it allows us to just have more hands that we can play in a plus EV manner, because we're playing them with max efficiency. Then we want to do that whenever we're able to do that, and when our opponent's out of position, he just can't stop us from doing that. The other thing that kind of matters is when we're in position, we do want to play some flops, and so we're going to want to take flops with some hands, and we're not going to want to waste some of our like marginally good hands that are ahead of our opponent's opening range, but just a little bit. So we're going to just take flops in position with hands that are ahead of our opponent's range, but not so far ahead that we'd be ahead of their continuing versus 3-bet range. So we're going to want to play like a capped and bound range, a mediocre, strong range with good flopping potential and equity and all of that. In a nutshell, basically, the reason we want to polarize our range and position is because we can. 3-betting out of position, unfortunately, against most players, whether they're good or really bad. It's only when they're just the right kind of bad or almost good that it can make sense, or if they have a very specific flaw in their approach to the game where 3-betting out of position with a polarized range can be very good. But for well, in GTO type reasoning, or against most players and against most fish, we can expect basically that we're going to be flat called more often when we're 3-betting out of position, and that'll especially be true if we start polarizing real starkly, and if our opponent catches on to the fact that we're polarizing and knows how to adjust, then they're just like never going to fold. So if we're going to have to count on seeing more flops, and if we want to play less flops, and if our opponent wants to call more often and play more flops, all of these things mean that we've got to be value injecting our 3-betting range and not taking too many light 3-bets. And the way to do that is going to be just to not use a polarized range. Just take whatever's the I don't know, we take some cusp hand in each section, like some ace X, some Broadway hand, and some pair. We 3-bet those and everything better than those. Now, some of the time when we're out of position, let's say that villain opens from early position in a full ring game, everybody folds to us and we're in the small blind, we're not going to want to continue very often, but when we do, we might just want to go ahead and 3-bet our entire range. Some players, if they're playing out of the small blind, even against a button open, they're just going to 3-bet everything from the small blind. So if we're going to 3-bet everything, we can't be any more depolarized than that, right? We can't be any more merged than just 3-betting our entire continuing range. And so if you think that some of the time when you're out of position it can make sense to do that, it shouldn't be too much of a stretch to realize that there's just more incentive to be less polarized when we're 3-betting from out of position. Basically, if villain wants to and is incentivized to flat call more often, then we need to make him play against a stronger range when he chooses to do that. We want to have less bluffs, and we don't want to give him a very easy road to exploiting us. And if we tried to 3-bet a polarized range into our opponent who's in position, and just let him like 4-bet a super polarized range against us, it's really bad for us, right? So we want to starkly, we want to just either, well, okay, so you could say merged, you can say linear, those things can be fine, but the main thing is depolarized. And depolarized means not strictly polarized. So there are other ways to have a depolarized range than to just 3-bet a linear range. So at the very least, we have to depolarize our ranges when we're out of position. But really, just for right now, and moreover, we do probably just want to stick with a linear 3-betting range when we're 3-betting out of position. When there's a lot of depth, when there's a lot of stack behind, deeper stacks favor the player that's got position. And that means that the player that's in position is going to want to flat call more often and go to more flops, right? He's going to want to take hands like 6-5 suited, 7-6 suited, 8-7 suited, 9-7 suited, a bunch of Broadways, just all kinds of hands that take him post-flop, all pairs. So there's not going to be as many, well, it depends, of course, on the positions, but just all else considered equal, when we're playing deeper, we're going to want to flat call more often and see more flops. So we're going to have to be pickier about the hands that we choose to 3-bet. So it's going to be a good idea to 3-bet the very best hands in our range, of course, for value, like queens plus and ace king. And, that should be obvious enough. But then how do we decide what hands to 3-bet for balance? Like, what's going to be the light part of our range that incentivizes our opponent to give us action when we do 3-bet queens plus and ace king? Or what are we going to use to bluff with, or semi-bluff with, in case our opponent does not want to give us action against our 3-bets when they're out of position? Well, I think the best way to pick our hands, in general, usually the best rule of thumb is when you're selecting hands to bluff with, you use the best hands that aren't good enough to call with. So use the top of your folding range, maybe some at the bottom of your would-be calling range, and that becomes your light 3-betting range. But in this particular situation, when we have a lot of depth, and really the deeper we are, the more true this is, when we're talking about the best hands, we're talking not so much about the best hands in terms of inherent showdown value, equity versus random, or some factor like frequent strength, or not even really our ability to what am I looking for here? Domination rating, domination value. That's not even going to be the best criteria for selecting what is meant by the best hand in a particular would-be folding range or would-be flatting range, bottom of flatting, top of folding range. What we're looking for here is the best hands in terms of specifically nut potential and synergy. So if you've watched anything that I've done on hand anatomy or where the value comes from in starting cards, you know that the way I see it, nut potential, synergy or connectivity, showdown value, and domination rating are pretty much where the value comes from in your starting cards. Never minding things like blocker effects and board coverage. Just really like the actual value of going post-flop with hands comes from those four primary factors. When we're 3-betting very deep, we want to be thinking more in terms of how often are we going to be able to make the nuts when there's a bunch of money left to play for behind. And what kind of options are we going to have? How many tools are going to be in our toolbox? How are we going to be able to exploit our opponents and really take it to them specifically based on what we know about them? And synergistic hands like suited connectors and like suited broadways, or really if we're deep enough and we want to flat all of our suited broadways, even hands like Queen 9 suited, Jack 8 suited, really tend to fit the bill. Some of our like maybe Ace 2 suited, Ace 3 suited. Maybe we want to go ahead and flat Ace 4 and Ace 5 suited, but then take like Ace 6 suited and Ace 7 suited and move those hands into our 3-bet bluff range. But yeah, in general, that's kind of the idea. So of course, when we're shallow and we're 3-betting, which is going to make for a smaller stack to pot ratio, then just as a rule of thumb, the more money that's in the pot going to the flop, the less money that there is behind, the more bad it is to have a bad hand. Just in terms of like showdown value and race equity, just like hot and cold, we get all the money in. If we got all the money in and there was no betting, how often do we win? So when we're more shallow and we're playing not so deep, we want to 3-bet hands. Of course, we want to still have our value range, but I'm talking about how to construct the light portion of our 3-betting range, and we want to use 3-bets that are going to have. And really, if we're out of position, and then we might not be really thinking in terms of the light portion of our 3-betting range, but we still are going to have a bottom of our 3-betting range. So you can kind of use those terms, not really interchangeably, but they mean similar things. You can think of them in similar contexts. There's a degree to which it makes sense to say that the worst hand in your 3-betting range is a bluff. You know. So yeah, you want to use the bottom of your range even should still be hands that have strong domination value, like 2 high cards or a medium or big pair, and showdown value. So your ace highs, good pairs, decent kings, like that kind of stuff. 2 big cards or a pair, they're going to 3-bet a lot better when there's a small stack to pot ratio than suited connectors, you know, just for sure, and probably pretty obviously. So just think about it like this. It's really valuable to flop top pair, top kicker when you've got a stack to pot ratio of 2, right? There's just so many second best hands that are going to go broke to you. You're not going to have to go for it all like by overbetting the turn and overbet jamming the river. You can get the money in small little chunks that give your opponent good odds without having to worry about reverse implied odds and getting coolered or letting your opponent hit some kind of like weird gut shot. These things just don't come up as much and don't matter as much. The payoff relative to the risk versus reward just doesn't weigh out negatively enough when stacks are kind of shorter. So villains, propensities, and the metagame. So really these two things can kind of be merged into a single topic when you're talking about how to 3-bet. Both these concepts are going to have the same impact on your strategy, because if your opponent is a calling station because it's a calling station, or if your opponent is a calling station because he thinks you're bluffing a lot, either way, he's going to be more sticky, and that's going to affect your strategy in exactly the same way, whether he does that all the time or if he's just doing it right now because of some history that's happened in the last 10 minutes. The more your opponent's going to call, the less you want to bluff. Obviously, right? The more often he folds, the more you want to bluff. The more he's going to re-raise you. If he's going to play 4-bet or fold only, and he's going to be 4-betting an awful lot more than 0, then the more polarized you ought to be, and probably the more balanced too in most cases. That latter point we could probably talk about. But in general, with no further information, it's going to be true or true enough. It's a good starting point. So really just playing the opposite of your opponent's expectations is always a good rule of thumb in Nolan Hold'em. So yeah, in conclusion, we want to be dynamic and variable sensitive when we're constructing 3-betting ranges. We ought to have these ideas in mind: position, depth, and how your opponent's likely to respond to your actions, whether it's just his nature or because of some history that you guys have. Doesn't much matter. So just to run it back down, kind of just real quick, in position, we're able to polarize, so we want to polarize. There's nothing our opponent can do about it. It allows us to play more hands in a plus EV manner, so we polarize when we're in position. And also, if our opponent, just think of it like this: what's your opponent going to do if you polarize your range? He's either going to just fold a bunch, or he's going to have to call some, or he's going to have to come back over the top a lot. I mean, he's either going to have to be balanced, which good luck to him, and we still have the positional advantage, so whatever, or he's going to have to try to do something to get around the fact that you're 3-betting the pants off of him, right? And what can you do about it? If he's going to adjust to how often you're 3-betting him, and you should be 3-betting more often when you're in position, what's he going to do? He can either call more often, in which case he's going post-flop out of position against an uncapped range with a capped range in a bloated pot with a positional disadvantage and probably a skill disadvantage if that's the way he's trying to respond. So that seems pretty good for you and pretty bad for him. Or he can play back at you more often. And if he's going to play back at you more often, then he's going to be 4-betting into you. And if he does that with anything but a... Well, okay, so what can he do? If he comes back over the top with a merged range, if he's just like 4-betting a very wide range, and he's 4-betting a wide value merged range, and he's 4-betting right into a polarized range, well, if you're 4-betting into a polarized range, you're going to be 4-betting into garbage that you probably ought to flat called against, or nutted value hands, which you probably should have folded against, right? So really, there's just not shit you can do. When you're out of position and your opponent 3-bets a lot, you just have to fold a bunch, and that sucks, but that's what you have to do. You have to respect the power of position, or else you're going to learn why it's powerful. Eventually, one way or the other, you're going to learn to respect the power of position. When you're in position, take advantage of that. If you just keep trying to go against the grain, and just keep either coming over the top of somebody when they're 3-betting the hell out of you when they're in position, or just flat calling a ton of your range and trying to go post flop. Either way, eventually you're going to get the hint. If there's a brain in your head, it's the Zen. There's something in Zen, a saying that is maybe. Let me see. This is I heard this from Alan Watts. A fool who continues in his folly will become wise. The fool who continues in his foolishness will become wise. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, you'll figure it out, basically. Really the right and correct strategy oftentimes, if there's a player to your left 3-betting the shit out of you, is to get up and leave. No kidding. Like, if you're not playing super high stakes and you don't have to put up with that, just bounce. There's no need for that. There's nothing you can do about it. And so that's why, when you're in position, you want to take advantage of the situation. When you're out of position, you can't do that. You can't just add a bunch of bluffs and flat the middle and go post-flop with a merged, capped, and bound range and 3-bet a polarized, uncapped, unbound range, it's just not going to work out. So when you're out of position, you need to use a more linear, value-heavy range without so many bluffs or light hands. The other things that matter are depth, and when you're very deep, the way that you select your 3-bets is going to be based on, and when you're deep and in position, you're going to want to use the bottom of your range, or the light part of your polarized 3-betting range should be the hands that are almost good enough to flat with in terms of connectivity, like suited connectedness and nut potential. Right? If you're out of position, you still want to 3-bet hands that are relying on those factors, or you can get away with 3-betting more hands that rely on those factors for their profitability. When you're shallow, when stack size is, stack depth is shallow, you need to focus more on 3-betting your hands that can win a race. Your ace highs, your pocket pairs, maybe like your 2 big cards like good king X. Hands that have good showdown value built into them, that are going to dominate a lot of the hands that continue against them. So good domination rating when you're shallow, good all-in pre-flop equity, which is the same thing as showdown value. Your ace highs, your pocket pairs, and like king, queen type hands are the best types of hands when you want to 3-bet in shallow situations. When you're in position, you can still polarize to some degree, but when you're getting to a certain level of shallowness, it doesn't really make sense to polarize anymore, because you're either going to be just going with every hand you 3-bet, or you're going to want to be going with a pretty high percent of the hands that you 3-bet. But that's probably a discussion for another time. Yeah, more shallow, big cards. Use big cards, medium to big pairs, good aces, or some suited aces, depending on the exact depth. When you're very deep, you can get away with using more of like your mediocre, marginal suited cards, like Queen 8 suited, Queen 9 suited, Jack 7 suited, Jack 8 suited, Ace 2 suited, etc. And your opponent's propensities. If your opponent's going to play very razor fold against you, if they're going to either come over the top or lay it down, you want to be polarized. It may be balanced. So if they're going to have an aggressive response to your 3-bets, we want to at least maybe start off with balanced and definitely polarized ranges. If our opponent is going to be flatting a ton and just very call-y, and they're going to be very loose and passive, playing a very compliant strategy, and then we're going to be going post-flop a lot. And if we're going post-flop a lot, it's good to have hands that flop well. So that's going to favor a merged, value-heavy, depolarized range. If our opponent is very nitty and tight, then we want to be bluff-heavy. And since he is so nitty and tight, we want to be starkly polarized. And that's because when we do get action from a nit, we don't want to do it by wasting pocket jacks, right? We don't want to turn pocket jacks into a bluff. If our opponent's not going to call us or continue with us against hands that pocket jacks beat, then we don't want to 3-bet pocket jacks, right? We want to starkly contrast our range against that type of villain, and maybe just 3-bet kings and aces for value and a shit ton of bluffs, because they fold too much. And so if they're folding too much, we don't want to waste hands, and we are able to bluff more with hands that we would otherwise not even be able to play. So why not take advantage of that, and instead of wasting a perfectly good hand like pocket tens, pocket jacks, maybe if our opponent's a super nit, king jack suited, instead of wasting a perfectly good flopping hand, ace 10 suited, ace jack offsuit, maybe even ace queen, by 3-betting it, turning it into a bluff, why not just take a flop with it, take it post flop, and bring hands like ace 5 offsuit, and ace 6 suited, ace 7 suited, maybe all your suited aces, maybe some of your suited kings like king 8 suited, king 9 suited, if it's, this all depends on the exact situation, just trying to give generalities, and it really, again, does not matter if the way that you expect your opponent to respond to your 3-bet game right now is because it is in his nature to respond that way, or because he thinks you're playing a strategy that he can exploit by responding this way. You still want to think kind of along these same lines. It doesn't really matter why you're gonna expect them to play a certain way. You just kind of want to tailor your strategy based on the way you expect them to play. So I guess that's it, guys. Until next time, Navonod over and out. Good quote, Luck, end quote.